Section 1. The Cage and the Battlefield. A tale of two fights. Fighting to win is not the same as fighting to survive. That's the whole deal right there. It's a simple thought, but it's a deep one, man. We sit here today, 2026, and we watch these incredible athletes in the UFC. These are modern-day gladiators. They step into the octagon, a controlled environment, to test their skills against another human being. It's beautiful. It's violent. It's a high-level problem-solving equation with dire physical consequences. But it's a sport. It has rules. It has a referee. And when it's over, both guys usually go home. They get paid. They heal up. They get ready for the next one. This is a universe away from the origins of combat. Think about the people who created the martial arts we see today. They weren't thinking about pay-per-view points or winning a shiny gold belt. They were thinking about a guy with a knife jumping them in a dark alley. They were thinking about multiple attackers. They were thinking about a battlefield where someone is trying to literally take their head off with a sword. The goal was singular and brutal. End the threat. Survive the encounter. Make it home to your family. It was a life-or-death operating system. So the question becomes, what would those ancient masters, those old-school warriors, think if they saw a UFC event today? It's a fascinating thing to unpack. They would see things that would blow their minds, for sure. The level of athleticism, the conditioning, the sheer physical power of a guy like Francis Ngannou. That's undeniable. They would see techniques refined to a razor's edge. A perfect double-leg takedown from a collegiate wrestler. The beautiful, brutal poetry of a Muay Thai clinch. But they would also see a cage. They would see gloves. They would see a man in a black shirt who can step in and stop the whole thing at any moment. They would see a system designed for a contest, not a system designed purely for survival. It's a fundamental difference in philosophy, and that's where the conversation gets really interesting. This isn't about which one is better. That's a dumb argument. It's like asking if a screwdriver is better than a hammer. They're different tools for different jobs. A UFC fighter is a specialized tool for a very specific high-pressure sporting event. An ancient warrior was a general tool for the chaotic, unpredictable, and infinitely more dangerous job of staying alive in a world with no rules. Understanding that difference is key. It helps us appreciate the beauty and the brutality of the modern sport, while also respecting the grim reality that forged the martial arts in the first place. This is a journey into the heart of combat itself. Section 2. The Old Ways. Combat as survival. Let's get into the mindset of the old-school creators. These weren't guys running a dojo in a strip mall. These were people whose lives depended on their skills. When they developed a technique, the only metric for success was, does it work? Does it stop the other person from killing you right now? Can you do it when you're tired? When you're scared? When you're bleeding? No room for flashy, low-percentage moves that look cool, but leave you open. Efficiency was king. The goal, cause maximum damage in minimum time. Many original techniques are considered dirty by modern sport rules. Eye gouges, groin strikes, throat shots, broken fingers, broken toes. The training reflected that brutal reality. There were no padded mats, no fancy recovery drinks. You trained on uneven ground, in the mud, in the rain. You practiced with pain. Your training partners weren't just your partners. They were simulating an enemy trying to hurt you. You learned to deal with fear and adrenaline. The real thing would be worse. The mental conditioning was just as important as the physical. You had to forge a mind that wouldn't shatter under extreme pressure. It was about becoming hard. Hard to break. Hard to stop. Hard to kill. The idea of a time limit or a referee was completely alien. The tools were also part of the equation. Knife, club, broken bottle, rock. Section 3. The New Arena. The Science of Sport Fighting. Now, let's teleport to the present day and walk into a top-tier MMA gym. It's a different universe, man. It's a laboratory. The first thing you'd notice is the science. Everything is measured, tracked, and optimized. These fighters have strength and conditioning coaches who are PhDs in human performance. They're using heart rate monitors, tracking their sleep with wearables, and analyzing their explosive output on force plates. They have nutritionists dialing in their diet to the last gram of protein to make a specific weight class. The old school guys trained hard, no doubt. But this is a level of scientific precision they couldn't have even dreamed of. It has created a new breed of athlete. The training itself is a beautiful synthesis. A modern MMA fighter is a specialist in multiple arts, all woven together. They spend hours a day drilling. They'll have a wrestling practice in the morning, a striking session with a Dutch kickboxing coach in the afternoon, and a jiu-jitsu roll in the evening. They study film of their opponents like a football team preparing for the Super Bowl, looking for tendencies, weaknesses, and patterns. It's an intellectual pursuit as much as a physical one. They are constantly experimenting, borrowing techniques from different disciplines, and pressure testing them in live sparring to see what works within the context of the sport's rules. This cross-pollination has led to an insane evolution of martial arts in a very short time. And then there are the rules. The unified rules of mixed martial arts are the software that the whole thing runs on. No headbutts, no eye pokes, no groin shots, no striking the back of the head or the spine. So, you put these two worlds side by side. What happens to the techniques? An old-school warrior's primary technique might be a thumb to the eye. Simple, brutal, effective. It ends the fight. But in the UFC, that move gets you disqualified and fined. So, it's not just useless, it's a liability. Instead, a modern fighter develops a lightning-fast jab. It scores points. It sets up power shots. It manages distance. The jab is a brilliant tool for a boxing or MMA match. But in a life-or-death struggle, jabbing a guy who has a knife is probably not your best first move. The purpose dictates the tool. Let's look at grappling. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have this incredible, sophisticated system of joint locks, chokes. It's amazing. An old-school creator would be fascinated by the leverage and control of BJJ. But they'd ask, what if a friend runs in and kicks you in the head while you're doing an armbar? Or what if the guy you're choking pulls a knife and stabs your leg? Sport, one-on-one, unarmed, soft mat, allows for these intricate techniques, but in a chaotic environment, they can be lethal liabilities. Old masters focused on high-percentage fight enders, moves that work on anyone, regardless of size or training, and that decisively neutralize a threat. A kick to the groin, a strike to the throat, universally vulnerable targets. The UFC must ban those to enable a prolonged contest. So fighters chase a different endgame, a clean knockout to the chin, or the perfectly applied submission that forces a tap. Those are harder to get and need setup, and they assume rules are followed. That creates evolutionary divergence. Sport optimizes for points and winning inside rules. Real-world systems optimize for survival against the unpredictable and armed. MMA's toolkit is deep and refined for its task, but an ancient warrior would spot big gaps. No knife defense, no plan for concrete and stomps. Not a criticism, just different specializations. The training methods are a world apart. Imagine you're an ancient Okinawan karate master, Shugyo, a kind of severe spiritual discipline, hitting a makiwara thousands of times to condition your knuckles into hammers, holding stances for hours in freezing cold to build mental and physical fortitude, breaking boards, breaking stones, forging body and mind into a weapon through repetition, hardship, and willpower. A mystical element, training that purified the spirit. Now, cut to a modern fighter's training camp. The intensity of an elite MMA sparring session. The approach is completely different, driven by data. Strength coaches calculating optimal load and velocity for a hex bar deadlift. Specific high-intensity interval training designed to mimic a 5-minute round. Less spiritual forging, more building a better biological machine. The old creators would be amazed by recovery methods, cryotherapy, infrared saunas, sports massage, physical therapists diagnosing and treating injuries. Train harder, more often, for longer careers. Push to the absolute limit and use science to rebuild stronger. An old-school warrior would call this black magic, but something is lost. Lack of safety gear and full-contact drills gave a PhD in pain and fear management. Been hit bare knuckle, trained in realistic, dangerous scenarios. You develop a different kind of mental armor. The rules are everything. They create the entire reality of the sport. An old-school warrior would probably look at a UFC fight and see it as a very specific and very strange ritual. So, you can punch him in the face, but not in the back of the head. You can kick his leg, but not his knee. You can choke him, but you have to let go when he taps his hand. To them, this would seem bizarre. For them, the only rule was to win. The presence of a referee who can stop the fight is the single biggest psychological difference. In the cage, there's a safety net. In the alley, there is no net. Your brain knows the difference. This shapes the fighter's mindset. A UFC fighter trains to be calm and strategic under pressure. Gas tank, the clock, the judges. It's a high-stakes athletic chess match. An ancient warrior's mindset was forged for something else entirely. Flipping a switch from peace to absolute, brutal violence in an instant. Recognizing a threat, assessing the situation, executing a plan to neutralize that threat with overwhelming force. It's less about a sustained, paced performance and more about a single, explosive, and final act. Then there's the question of effectiveness. Who wins in a real fight? It's the classic, unanswerable question. A top UFC heavyweight is one of the most dangerous unarmed human beings on the planet. Timing, power, conditioning. In a one-on-one, unarmed fight in an empty room, my money is on the UFC fighter 99 times out of 100. But a real fight is never that clean. What if the other guy has two friends? What if he pulls a screwdriver? What if the fight happens on a staircase? What if the fight happens in a crowded bar? The old school systems, born from that chaos, spent a lot more time on awareness, de-escalation, using the environment. The old creators would respect the hell out of the skill and toughness of a modern fighter, but they would be critical of the sport's blind spots. They'd argue the one-on-one focus leaves you vulnerable to messy reality. Gloves can teach habits that break fingers bare knuckle. Entertainment can distract from combat's original, deadly purpose. So what's the final takeaway? Would the creators of old-school combat approve of the UFC? It's a mixed bag. They would be in awe of the athletes. The sheer physical evolution, the dedication, the science behind their power and endurance, that would be mind-blowing to them. They would see a fighter like Jon Jones, with his creativity and fight IQ, and recognize a true master of combat strategy. They would admire the discipline to cut weight, and the courage to step into that cage. They would see the spirit of the warrior, a willingness to test oneself in the crucible of combat, and they would respect it deeply. But they would also be deeply critical. They would see the rules as a crippling limitation. They would scorn techniques effective only because of gloves and the mat. They would look at a fighter who pulls guard on concrete and shake their heads. They would worry the sport creates fighters who are dangerous in the cage, but unprepared for asymmetrical real-world violence. They would see focus on points and rounds as a distraction from the true objective, to end the fight decisively. They would probably view the UFC as incredible, but ultimately flawed. A beautiful game, but a game nonetheless. The most enlightened masters would see potential for synthesis. They would tell a modern fighter, "Your athleticism is incredible. Your training science is revolutionary. Now take those attributes and apply them to our principles. Keep your rules for the sport, but also train for reality. Spar without gloves sometimes, carefully. Practice defenses against knives. Drill scenarios with multiple attackers. Never forget the true art is about survival, not points. Use the sport to sharpen your timing and your body, but use our ways to sharpen your mind for the chaos of the real world."